Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and it's Thursday, which means I'm joined by JP Mason, my usual Thursday companion. And Kev, you've jumped in and you're just sitting there, stroking your head, thinking, what are we getting ourselves in for in the next 1 hour? The who, yeah. Who's to blame? That's what I want to know. JP, the other night, I was at BAaD and Design for the FANZONE, and my missus nudged me and goes, "There's JP," and there you were standing at the bar. And I'm going to use the word enjoyed loosely because obviously I enjoyed your company, but I was going to say I enjoyed watching the game with you. It was a horrible night of football, despite the fact that you and I were able to stand together for a wee while and watch that. You had to leave at full time to go elsewhere. But I just said to you before we went live, there was a sense of the inevitable, I think, even in amongst the crowd, not even, at extra time or at penalties. Before that, I got that sense from the Celtic fans I was with the other night. Did you get a bit of that feeling yourself, JP?
Yeah, sometimes when I go into a kind of new environment to watch a game that I haven't been in before, I immediately get the feeling one of two ways. That you either get that feeling that it is kind of, there's positive energy and everybody's kind of, singing from the same hymn book. I missed this. I just saw David McKendrick getting in his car just as he was obviously darting off to go and watch it elsewhere. But I missed the music, and I missed the Champions League music if it was played, because I arrived just as after it kicked off. And I said last week, I really hope that's not the first and last time that we hear Zadok the Priest at Celtic Park, and obviously it turns out that it will be. But I have to say, just to explain why I left at full time, I'd put myself down to play football at Tory Glen, as I always do. And anybody who plays football knows that if you are playing with somebody or playing a game and then one person doesn't show up and it has to be uneven sides, that's quite snide patter. So it happened to me about a month or two ago, and I was raging because the team I was in had to play with a man down, and we got scudded by about eight or nine goals.
Just like last night, really.
Aye, wasn't it? Well, yeah. That was accidental, but there you go. And it's not enjoyable. So I left you at full time, and we shared a couple of words before we left, and it wasn't looking good, was it? I mean, the fact that it was even going to extra time was concerning. And so I listened to the rest of the game on the bus out to Tory Glen, and then obviously the game was still going on. So I kept one ear of my earpods in whilst I was playing the first sort of 15, 20 minutes of the game, which also included the penalty shootout. So I've never endured a more surreal first 20 minutes of playing a game of football in my life. My head was definitely not in the game I was playing. I was just like trying to imagine what was going on over there, and couldn't see the body language of the players as they were taking penalties. All I was relying on was 90s style radio commentary where you're like, this is horrendous. It was actually borderline torture, to be honest. And then as soon as I heard my head I'd missed, I just took my earphone out, went and put it on top of my bag at the side of the pitch and kept playing. And it was almost kind of like, oh, nobody else in this pitch cares about that game, really. There was a few Celtic fans that were playing, but I didn't really, nobody else said, oh, do you know what happened or anything like that. They were just playing the game, and I'm just playing the rest of that game going, I cannot believe we are out of the Champions League. I genuinely cannot believe it. And possibly from the moment that I saw the starting lineup and saw Yang starting, I knew it was going to go one of two ways. It was like either Yang's going to be a hero and I'm going to have to eat my words from last week, or it's going to go the other way, and it went the other way.
It went the other way, JP. And, in relation to the point you just made there, I'm going to start off by throwing this one over to you, Kev. News this morning, the information that's coming out is that there is interest in Yang. There was recent interest in the player. Supposedly Norwich were interested. Now it's Birmingham City. Obviously, they're like an excel at Birmingham at the moment. And the other one, of course, is Adamida. Now, what I tend to do, it's not because, Acsom never tries to be, in the know or break news and all that kind of stuff, Kev, because we are reacting many times to what's actually happening. But from time to time, through, just people you've met along the way, you do get information, you do get sources, etc., etc. And I do have someone that I could speak to in relation to the Swansea City links this morning, and they confirmed that absolutely that is something that they are interested in doing. They want to do that business. They want to take Ida down to Swansea. That would, I think, explain quite a bit in relation to some of the comments that Brendan Rodgers has made. You know, just the other week there, I asked the question, who was he talking about when he was talking about wages and Celtic pay your wages and you've got to do your best? And a lot of people thought it was Maeda. And, you know, you're wondering, maybe it makes sense that it's Adam Maeda. He's not been himself this season, Kev. You know, we could trace it right back to pre-season, actually, with the fitness issues at Sporting Lisbon, getting extra additional training at half-time to the point where he threw up. And then, obviously, he's not really started in terms of his form. Yang and Ida, you know, in terms of, is it good for Celtic to move them on? Yeah, but, and there is a but, what do we do between now and Monday? Because we can't run with any fewer players than we already have.
No, we can't run with any fewer players in what we have, but I think Swansea have probably found a stash of magic mushrooms left over for the film of a Clinton if they want to give us money for that.
Great movie. Let's just talk about that for the next 50 minutes. Why don't we?
The first scene when they talk about the corner flags, it just sets up a whole cult film, really, really.
And we had David Heyman. We had an actor from that film on This Is Acsom last year. And I spoke to him about it, and he says to me after the event, he goes, you know, of everything I've been in, so many people ask me about Twinstown. It's like, you know, because, I don't know, at the time they were saying it was the Welsh train spotting, weren't they?
It's a completely different type of film, I think.
Vibe, I think, you know, the culture of it, yeah.
When you've got one of the flying pickets in it, which
he plays a great part.
He does play
we digress, part. Kev, we digress.
And Dougray Scott, and Dougray Scott getting given a Hearts top to actually play the and he goes, no, he says Hibs. No, he's got to, was it well he got given a Hibs top, he says no, this guy's got to be a Rangers fan. He says because of his character he's got to be a Rangers fan, and they went and got him a Rangers top. So the word
they used probably couldn't be repeated on Acsom. He says if I've got to be one of them, then I'm going to wear a Rangers top. That's what he said.
But both of them are done for me. I mean, both of them, Yang and Ida. I mean, before we were told at the end of the season that Yang was getting touted to Portsmouth and Championship clubs by his agent anyway. And for Ida, I think the ship's now sailed. I think his chance at Celtic.
Is he checked out? Do you get the vibe, Kev, that he's kind of checked out? He's already had his head turned. He's got it in his mind. He wants to go back to England. Do you get that sense from the player?
Jersey's too heavy. I think that's been shown since Kyogo's left.
Yeah.
The jersey's too heavy. It's quite weird as well as you're talking about Rodgers actually saying folk checking out in that, and we don't know to think it was Maeda, and it maybe still could be. We don't actually know. But I think the jersey's too heavy for Ida. I don't think Yang is good enough. But what I will really, really say is both of them were good enough to beat a team for Kazakhstan.
They should have been. They should have been.
And for me, we can talk about the shambles, which is what goes on in the background of your football club. But the cup final defeat, which was our worst cup final defeat since 1994 against Raith Rovers, and that the other night, which was probably our worst European exit. I thought the most humiliating ever, anyway, or embarrassing ever for the players is 100% due to Brendan Rodgers and the players on the pitch. And doesn't matter what Rodgers says in the background or what he says to the board can quite rightly point to him and says, you had a squad there that the clubs that we faced in our last two major games would kill for, and you couldn't beat them. Away you go. And I think they would be quite right to actually say that.
I disagree with that, sorry.
I think there's more of a collective responsibility. I agree that we should be able to overcome Kairat. When you look at their standing in European football, I've called them a Euro minnow, and I don't think that's disrespectful. I think they probably realise that themselves. But to go in there with such a lack of investment, I think it's negligence on the part of the people that actually sign off the deals. You know, to go in there having only spent £3 million, I just think, and by the way, £3 million on players who aren't necessarily starting, one of which isn't even in the Champions League squad.
What about such a lack of effort, heart and talent?
I think there's a lack of a game plan, Kev. I think the game plan, that's on the gaffer. The game plan's on the gaffer. The individual lack of what you're talking about there, that's on the players. But the fact that we've gone in there, with underinvestment, that's on the board. So I think it's collective. I wouldn't even like to say it's more this one's fault than the others. It's a collective responsibility for me. And by the way, I'm not sitting here standing up for Rodgers, because a lot of the talking points I'm going to bring up today are focusing on the part Rodgers plays, Kev. But anyway, JP, you said you disagree. So what's your take on what Kev says there? Kev's talking about the fact that if you're in the board, you're looking at Rodgers and saying, it's your own fault, you should have got through that.
That set of players haven't had to go through a Champions League qualification tie. As much as they've played Champions League football, they haven't had the pressure of that game. I honestly think you take that game and you put it in end of October, November, and we play Kairat in the Champions League proper with the additions that we should have had in before the other night, we take care of them handily. But I was looking through before I came on, because the thing that ultimately pushed me to regain a season ticket or rebuy a season ticket after a 4-year hiatus, having previously had one for 10 years. So 2012, I couldn't get a ticket for Barcelona at home. I'd been buying single match day tickets for games in the league and the cups and all the rest of it, basically as and when I could go, because my job at that time was quite sporadic in terms of quite often had to work weekends, because I worked in a music venue, as I still do. But at that point in time, it was a case of I had to just do everything I could at that venue, because I was spinning lots more plates than I'm spinning now, because I was booking the bands as well as running it with my colleague. So I got a season ticket based on the fact that I couldn't get a ticket for the Barcelona game, and I was like, that's it. I never want to be in a position where I'm scrambling around trying to ask favours to get tickets. I wanted it to be in my own hands. I've got my own season ticket, and I'll go to as many games as I can. And since 2013, should I say, I've gone to pretty much every single home Celtic game, be it in Europe, the Cups, the League. Every single game I've almost gone to. I would say 80 to 90% of games. There's obviously been the occasional ones where I've had to work or been away or something like that, but more often than not. And in that time since I got my season ticket, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 occasions we've not qualified for the Champions League. 2014, 2015, Maribor beat us in that game at Celtic Park and went on to finish bottom of their group in the Champions League on 3 points with 3 draws. 2015, 2016, Malmo went on to finish bottom on 3 points, and it was 1 win against Shakhtar Donetsk. So they won 1-0 at home. 2018, 2019, AEK Athens, they finished bottom of their group on 0 points. 2019, 2020, Cluj knocked out in the next round after they played us by Slavia Prague, 2-0 on aggregate. And then we end up playing them in the Europa League and beating them handily with no pressure. Handily beat them. There was no question that we were beating them in that game, whether it was revenge or not. 2021, 2022, Midtjylland knocked out 4-0. Knocked out in the round, the third qualifying round, and in the playoff round, PSV beat Midtjylland 4-0 in aggregate and went into the Champions League. Out of all of them, the only real one that I could give the club a pass for is the Midtjylland game, given that Ange was still trying to put a team together. Those qualifiers came far too early. He still gets criticised for his European record, and that is taken into consideration. The Midtjylland game, I think it's grossly unfair, because again, you give Ange those Midtjylland games a few months into his campaign, takes care of them handily. Absolutely takes care of them handily, right? Yeah. So we've heard all summer is Brendan Rodgers been asked about signings. We lost Kyogo in January. We lost Nicholas Kuhn nearly 2 months ago. And we lost Jota to injury in May. Mm-hmm. And everybody's just sort of went feet up on the desk. It's absolutely fine. we should be fine. Regardless of who we get in these qualifiers, we should be fine. Meanwhile, Club Brugge have just absolutely dismantled Rangers 9-1 in aggregate, sell £70 million worth of players, or maybe more, and bring it in, and then buy £30 million worth of players to ensure that they get to the Champions League. Yang has not done anything in a Celtic jersey to make me think that for 1 second that he was going to produce the goods in a must-win, high-stakes game the other night. We didn't have any other wingers to play, so basically it was like, Yang's the only option. And then on the right, we're playing James Forrest. I mean...
Ringing him out. The same player going to the same well for the same player once again, JP. And that's not personal against Forrest. He's the most decorated player in our history. But it's not right.
I get that the team didn't play well the other night. And obviously, on paper, you're thinking we should win that game. But the spectre of no Scottish teams won in Kazakhstan, the Champions League qualification and all of that, the psychology of the fact that we haven't brought in players to help.
The mood of the camp, the energy, absolutely.
Everything about it. If the fan base in BAaD were feeling like that the other night, what was the team feeling like? What was the squad feeling like? It was basically feeling like we've not been helped out here. We can see the quality that's left the building. We can see it. We can see the empty coat hangers in the dressing room where Kyogo's shirt once hang, where Jota's shirt hangs, but there's no boots there, and where Kuhn's shirt hang and there's no replacement.
Yep. So, but also, JP, constantly being reminded by your manager that the quality of the squad's not good enough. Every week, every single week where Brendan Rodgers has been asked, he's constantly going on about we need more quality. What does that do to the people that are actually wearing the jersey?
Players aren't blind. They might not all have social media accounts, but there's no way you're telling me that in that industry you're not aware of what is being said in the press.
Big time.
Well, you're saying there, lads, that Rodgers is there to deflect for that, and Rodgers is saying, I need more quality. So he's to blame that the fact that we couldn't beat a team for Kazakhstan then for putting that out in the open.
I think, Kev,
his ego, his narcissism is manifesting itself into that team. You can't say, like, since we got, when was the last time that we won a big game? Young boys, and we scraped through them, right? Since then, we've failed to beat Rangers. Any big game that we came up, we've lost a cup final. We've lost that Champions League qualifier, which is one of the easiest ones that we're ever going to get. I think I would probably want to go and look back and look at the teams against Maribor, AEK Athens. I would still say that we had a squad that was good enough to actually beat all of the teams. I'm still saying that. So if you have a look back at that, we've had a team that has been like treading water since February. And the manager has done hee-haw to change it. And if you're being truthful, to look at it, since Rodgers has came back, in the two full seasons that he's came back, we've had 5 months of decent football. 5 months of decent football.
I don't disagree with you, Kev. I do not disagree with that.
In March. We lost Kuhn in March. Rodgers has had plenty of times to work out a different system, different tactics. He hasn't done it. Tuesday night is 100% on him.
I disagree.
We're playing a team that is a level of St Johnstone. So last year we got beat 1-0 off St Johnstone. Learned our lesson. A week later we beat them 6-0. That didn't happen the other night.
No.
Because there's a mentality issue, and that is coming from the manager.
I don't disagree with anything you said other than the 100% bit, because I think there's a systemic issue, and I'm going to pick up on something that JP said there, because you looked at the quality of the sides that have knocked us out, JP. If you go back to 2014, different manager, right? 11 years ago. It's Ronnie Dyler. The only reason we play Maribor is because Legia Warsaw didn't fill in the correct paperwork, right? And when we go into that game, there was no spend, absolutely no spend. And in actual fact, we had sold a few players and we had brought in £11.5 million that summer, no spend. Forster was replaced by Craig Gordon, who hadn't kicked a ball in about 3 seasons. And we go in and we get beat from Maribor. So was that 100% Ronnie Dyler's fault, or is that a shared responsibility? Is there a systemic issue there? The following season, it's Malmo. And when you look at what we actually invested in that side, and again, it's Ronnie Dyler, 3.275 spent 2015. That was 10 years ago. Roughly the same amount of money was spent. By the way, that's net, whereas this time we're 17, 18 million pounds up, maybe even more. A few days after we get knocked out of Europe, we sell Van Dijk because that's what we do. And then we go and buy some more players for later on in the tournament. Nadir Chifchi for 1.5, Derek Boyata for 1.5, Scott Allen for under 300 grand. So there's a systemic issue. 2018, it's Rodgers, it's Athens. And going into that game, I remember all the chatter in that one was Boyata refusing to play. The Athens game was not even the beginning, but it was part of the domino effect of Brendan Rodgers eventually leaving the football club. £19 million, if you want to look at the summer transfer fees, in profit. And we get knocked out the Champions League, losing the Champions League bounty. We sell £20 million we bring in for your man Dembele. Armstrong leaves for £7 million. Sviatchenko leaves for £1 million. People say, oh, but we signed at Edward. Sviatchenko and Armstrong paid for that. So whenever, we're still up by £20 million. Unbelievable amounts of profit. Rodgers eventually leaves. So if you look at the timeline there, at the beginning of April, he's talking August. He's talking Terminado. By the end of August, we're out of Europe. And by February, he's walked. And he's got his suit all kind of lined up and tailored for Leicester City. Clues 2009, Neil Lennon. How did we prepare for that? Well, we sold Kieran Tierney for £25 million. And then we get bounced out by Clues. We're sitting with £15 million profit in the bank. We went out and bought Chris Julien, who sat on the bench. You'll remember we played Callum McGregor at left back, ball and golly, £3 million on the bench. Absolutely systemic. Every single time we go into a situation, we're not prepared. We shouldn't be buying players right now for this Champions League campaign. That's how short-sighted we are as a football club. Ferencváros, it's during COVID, slightly different scenario. And Midtjylland, I agree with you, JP. It was a game too soon for Ange. So, Kev, everything you've said about Brendan Rodgers, I agree, other than the 100% responsibility. I think there are systemic issues, Kev, with Celtic that feeds into the fact that we're always ill-prepared.
Paul, I've been saying that for 8 years.
I know you have. Since episode 1 at the kitchen table, I know.
I've been saying that for 8 years, and it just seems now that folk are coming round to that way of thinking.
True.
But I still have a look at this, and we are watching a joyless, soulless team, and we have been for months. And that's it, and that's down to the manager.
That, I think, the mood of the manager, right? Kind of like, the team reflects the mood of the manager. I get what you're saying there, because it's all about energy. And if you get the energy from the manager and he's downbeat and he's been playing it all down and saying that we don't have enough quality, that is going to feed into your team. Absolutely get that, Kev. And sometimes when you throw a group of players in, like we did against Livy, you get a different energy because there's a different bounce, and they're all trying to catch the manager's eye, etc. But the core group of players now, Kev, may well be coming to the end of the cycle as well. That's bad squad management. But the games that I've just spoken about, they're going right back to 2014. That spans, right, 4 different managers over 5 different spells. So Rodgers has had issues the last time, and he's had issues this time. Neil Lennon had issues, Ange Postecoglou, and also Rondella. So there's systemic issues. And there's lots of good comments coming through here. And by the way, can I just say, in relation to this, if anybody's tuning in expecting sweetness and light and, pink clouds and all that kind of stuff and positivity, it's going to be pretty difficult, I'm afraid. And, it's basically because we are reacting to what's happening in front of us. We're not coming on here saying, you know what, if we moan, we're going to get more clicks. Absolutely not. I would much rather focus on going to Ibrox at the weekend after them getting absolutely pumped last night. They're in disarray, and I would much rather focus on that. We will talk a wee bit about it. But I'm going to bring in as much as we possibly can. And I'm going to start off here because later on today, gents, right, as soon as this finishes, I'm going to do what JP had to do the other night, and I'm going to have to gnash, because I am going to be meeting Not The View in Glasgow. The Not The View boys, the classic. It's Jerry Dunbar, Andy Murdoch, and the average Joe Miller. And we're going to be recording an episode of This Is Acsom that will go out on Friday night. And the reason I bring it up is because we're such a different club from now compared to the early 90s and obviously the takeover. But there are some elements of the club that I find really, really familiar and similar to back in the day. So I'm going to bring this up, Ridiculizer, and it's not to fall out with you or whatever else, because you comment on a regular basis on here. You have done for a number of years. But there's a few bits of this that I'm going to be speaking about. Acsom poured scorn upon protests and boycotts all summer, whilst lapping up and featuring all the sweatshop merch. Now the damage is done and they're promoting a failed Ponzi scheme. Trust in me, and there's a snake. Right, I'm going to run through this bit by bit. First thing I would say in relation to the boycotts, I'm pretty clear on boycotts. In the early 90s, the boycott was a result of the Celtic supporters and the fan groups, the activist groups, Celts for Change, Save Our Celts, but it was Celts for Change that organised it. Set up a boycott. And the reason they set up a boycott at that time is because they knew there was an end game in setting up the boycott. Celtic were to the tune of £6 million in debt to the Bank of Scotland. And if they were not a going concern, the Bank of Scotland would call in the debt. The way we could prove as a fan base that we were not a going concern is by the attendance dropping below 10,000. Now, at a home game, the Celts for Change movement knew that. They were working in cahoots with David Lowe and Fergus McCann. They knew that they could take action, boycott the game, get it below a certain figure. The bank would act. Fergus could swoop in from Canada, pay the money, and then the takeover would happen. There was an end game. Right, if we boycott a game right now, if we were to, and I don't think we should, as you say, Ridiculizer, I don't think you should. That is my opinion. It might be shared by Kevin and JP. I don't know. It's my opinion. What would happen? Seriously, what would happen if Celtic fans were to boycott the game? Back in the 90s, they were relying on walk-up. They were relying on people coming up to the turnstiles. They did not have a lot of season tickets in the stadium. I think it was 6,000 by the time we did the boycott, right? 6,000 season books. You're going to be standing outside Celtic Park, JP, saying to Kev, don't go in. You've already got your season ticket. You're telling me not to go in. That would not be well received in my view. Even if, and let's say there was 12 to 13 people, 1,000 people not going to the game when we boycotted it back in the 90s, would it make a big difference because you've already paid for your ticket? It's merely a protest. You're merely saying, I'm not coming, there's an empty seat, and then the revenue you would have spent in the stadium, the club's not going to get that. JP, would it make a big difference to the those that control the football club right now? I could see the point of it in the 90s. I can't really see where it would go this time round. Just my opinion.
But I don't know if you saw my reaction as I read that comment from Ridiculizer. But the fact that he used the words Ponzi scheme is very, very odd, because last night I was listening to some non-Celtic podcast, shall we say.
I wonder who that might have been.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about what I was going to say on this show today, and I was texting my mate Mikey, who I go to the games with and is a massive Celtic fan. Dad's an investor, all the rest of it, and I said to him, I said, we were texting, and I said, shame on them. If they are still in charge at the end of the season and someone's head hasn't rolled for this, I will genuinely consider renewing. I'll be sending an email to someone and the response will depend on my actions. I said, that's how disillusioned I am. It feels like I've been a serial gambler and I've lost millions. And then I was like, actually, no, is it not more like a Ponzi scheme? And I Googled Ponzi scheme last night, and the exact description of a Ponzi scheme is how I feel. As I took that earbud out of my ear at Tory Glen the other night and sat it on my bag, I just felt like I'd been investing into something that isn't, that the people in charge don't share the same goals that I have, and they don't share the same goals that the players clearly have or the manager. Because to not invest ahead of those two games in the Champions League is dereliction of duty. It's mismanagement off the scale, and I don't care who they are, but someone has to be responsible for that and come out and give us an answer as to why those decisions were made to not strengthen the team ahead of those games. It's absolute lunacy that it didn't happen. And with regards to boycotts and protests and whatnot, I've already made my mind up. They're not getting another penny from me. I mean, they'll get the Europa League package off me because I have to. I don't think I've got any choice in that. I still want to support the team. I don't want to just abandon that. But in terms of merchandise, I put that strip up deliberately because that strip was from the first season that we participated in the Champions League. season 2001, 2002, when we beat Ajax away, and then obviously lost the home tie, but we went through the tie to get into the Champions League for the first time. So for 24 years, we have been in and out of the Champions League. Now, I don't expect us to get into the Champions League every season. That would be naive. If we come up against a PSV or an Arsenal or somebody that is ultimately better than us, then you have to hold your hands up and say, aye, okay, fair enough. But this has happened so many times now and will continue to happen. As if you listen to Paul from Celtic Fans TV, he was arguing the case on that the other day quite articulately. He put it well, basically said it'll be the same thing again. And I watched at a Roma game. I went to a random game, Roma against AC Milan. Roma were the Roma fans were either against the board. I think it was against the board because your man Ranieri was the manager in charge, and Ranieri wasn't getting it, but the board were getting it. And I'm not sure. I need to go back and look into the history of that and find out what it was that they were up in arms about. But I watched their ultras turn their back on the game. I think it was halfway through the first half, turned their back on the game and stood with their back turned to the game for maybe 5 minutes, and then staged a walkout throughout the game. Something has to be. This can't just be a shrug of the shoulders and all right, okay, it happens. It's not that case.
No, it's not. It's not.
We've seen it far too many times. And I'm paying nearly £800 for a season ticket. And like what Ridiculizer said, what feels like a Ponzi scheme where they're just taking your money and not spending it the way I would expect every penny that I put into Celtic to be spent, wisely and appropriately in terms of strengthening the squad. And it hasn't been done. And I want answers as to why that hasn't happened.
I'm going to come to that with the communication. What Ridiculizer was saying, though, was he was actually levying that accusation at the trust rather than the club. So what I would say to Ridiculizer is this. If you have an issue with who Celtic choose to supply their kits, speak to Celtic. Don't have a go at the fans for that, right? Because Celtic supporters want to wear the hoops. Celtic fans want to buy the hoops for their kids and all this kind of stuff. So I don't think, I think the direction of that particular gripe is misplaced. If you've got an issue with Adidas supplying kits to Celtic, go and speak to Celtic. Don't expect Celtic fans not to buy kits for their kids and all the rest of it. In relation to a boycott, I think a boycott is merely a protest, because you're not going to boycott enough games to siphon off £100 million that's sitting in the bank. You're not going to do that. You're talking years and years before that makes an impact financially, right? So what we have said on A Celtic State of Mind, and I spoke to Duncan Smiley, who was on the show last night, is that in relation to this, I think that you've got to mobilise as a fan base like they did back in the day. And I think that there's got to be some kind of a plan. What is that plan? How can you influence Celtic? Is it because you have enough shareholding? Probably the only way to influence the football club. It's not an immediate result. It's going to take at least 3 years, I would suggest, maybe even longer, to be able to get that level of influence. But at least something is being prompted and something's being done, rather than just saying, look at you guys, you're part of the problem because you buy Adidas merch. No, I don't think it's as simple as that. So go to the football club if you've got an issue with Adidas. And in relation to the Celtic Trust, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and hear what's going to be said on Tuesday night at Gracie's, at 7 o'clock at Gracie's. It's the AGM. And then we'll take it from there and we'll see if there are going to be changes. But I've met Duncan Smiley. I've met David Lowe on a number of occasions. And to be quite frank, I think in terms of business nous and working with PLCs, I think they know what they're doing. So if you can get the drive for 5 was something that David worked on when he was the chair back in the day of the Celtic Trust. If you get 5%, you have far more influence than we currently do. You have far louder voice than you have right now. It's amplified. But going on to, before I come back to you, Kev, because I know you're itching to get back in, before I do that, I'm going to speak about what you said, JP, in relation to what's just happened, right? What has just happened at Celtic, and what have Celtic said to the fan base, like yourself, like everybody who invests so much money into the football club. So what I've just done here, I thought, right, let's go into the Celtic news site. So there you go. There's the official website. What we got in there at the club communicating with the fans, right? So we've got some reports in relation to Brendan's reaction. He seems to be the only spokesperson at Celtic. UCL playoff disappointment, you can say that again. Celtic starting 11. So as you can see here, this week we have had nothing Nothing from the club, no communication from the football club. It's all the usual kind of stuff, like it's just a normal week. So if we then bounce over to their social media, and one of the most active social media sites that they currently have, look at us looking all small there, I'll fix that in a minute, then it's probably X, right? So you look at that, there's Celtic Football Club right there. So there has been a repost which happened yesterday from a fixture change. Prior to that, again, there's the man, Brendan Rodgers, talking about us getting pumped out the Champions League. And there's the update from the game. There has been nothing, no communication, Kev, from the football club. This is something you've spoken about in the 8 years that you've been on a Celtic state of mind. I don't expect, actually, from this club any more than what they give us, but it isn't good enough, is it? I mean, it's so easy to communicate, Kev. Why don't they come out? And why is it always Brendan that's having to field these questions? There's only so many things you can ask Brendan Rodgers about the running of this football club. It needs to be a football question you ask him. What about Michael Nicholson speaking to the fans, communicating with the fans, engaging with the fan base after such a horrific outcome in the Champions League qualifier?
What they'll be hoping for if they get business done in the next 4 days, and I can't believe I just uttered the words, but I have. You'll probably find if they get maybe 4 or 5 players in over the next 3 or 4 days, then you might get an in-house interview with Jerry McCulloch, with Michael Nicholson during the international break. I'm sure we got one of them with Peter Wall at one time, and after one of those Champions League, when we've been pumped at the Champions League before, I'm sure we got one. Or did you not get an exclusive interview to the Sun or something like that? I remember that as well. Yeah. So that's what we're going to get. It is very, very difficult, and fair play to anybody is backing the Celtic Trust. Fair play to the guys who want to take it on. They've got a very, very long road ahead of them, and what they really need is some of the bigger hitters who are already holding percentage shares to get behind them and actually force the change from within. I was on the Celtic World Order podcast, and yes, we've got a board full of decent businessmen. They've probably all been there too long. It's a bit stale in that, but there's not one of them I want to be making football decisions. And I think I've been very, very straight down the middle with what I've said in 8 years. We need a director of football, and we need guys in there who actually know the business of football. And I don't think we've actually got that. And I think that's proven with all the quotes that we've seen that Liam put on the blog from Ronnie Dyer, Neil Lennon, Brendan Rodgers twice, and Ange Postecoglou and that. You've got numerous professionals who Celtic were good enough to give a job, who thought they were great to give a job, pointing this out to them. This is not the way that we should be doing business, and they keep on doing it. It's just a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? I mean, I think I says on the Monday after the cup final, we've only signed anybody to be found out if we're in the Champions League in the last week of the transfer window, and here we are. And I probably says it tongue in cheek at that time, no believing that they could do it again, but they have done it again.
Yeah.
With the terms of the boycotts and all of that, I like what JP says. It's back in the 90s, it was different. There was a financial element. There's no longer that financial element. I like the inflatable shark thing. We just all going and wave inflatable sharks, because that is quite amusing to folk who took the mickey out of us. So we actually just build on that.
You just own it.
I like walk-ins, leave the stadium empty for 15 minutes, then walk in. But again, a lot of folk they want to no support the team. I've been involved in trying to get fans involved. I've been involved in trying to get fans to do boycotts and stop going to games and boycott merchandise and all that. They're not going to do it.
The makeup of the fans has changed, Kev. The makeup of the fans. You imagine Parkhead going up to that gate, the few games actually. It wasn't just one until we got the result of getting under the 10,000. With organised boycotts. Generally speaking, this isn't me being sexist. This is a cross-section of people going to the football back then. It was guys, right? It was. Now you've got people going out with their kids, and it's a different makeup. It's a different dynamic. And you're telling maybe a fella, his missus and a couple of kids, you're not going in. They'll be like, I will. It's completely different, mate. You go in, you sit in your seat, That's different from back in the day. The whole dynamic of it's changed.
And you'll have the stubborn ones that go, you're not telling me what to do. I do what I want to do, which is
Because they've already bought the ticket, Kev. The whole thing's changed.
Aye, and you're talking about the merchandise thing, and we've been speaking about it, like the constant tweets that they're sending us. We're now releasing a pair of swimming shorts. We're now releasing a gone out tracky top. We're now releasing, they'll maybe release a Thursday night kit now, who knows. But we're going, why do folk keep on buying? Well, folk have got the choice. Folk have got the choice. They can either buy it or they can't buy it. And nobody's going to tell them that they can't do it or they shouldn't be doing it. When I went to the first game of the season, you have a look about and you see thousands upon thousands of folk wearing the new gear.
Yep.
And you're going, well, that's their choice. It is their choice. But something needs to change, and it will. And I think the only way we'll get the change if it comes from within.
From within, yeah. And the only way to do that is to have the influence within the actual makeup of the shareholding. And you know, this is the thing. It's not as though, you know, all the podcasts can get together and all these bloggers can get together, because again, not everybody supports Celtic this way. Not everybody tunes in at 12:30 every day, JP, and then is influenced by what they hear on a podcast.
And I'll tell you why. Folks say, oh, we should do something on that. The bottom line is, folk have got an opinion on me, folk have got an opinion on Paul, folk have got an opinion on JP, right? Whether good or bad, rightly or wrongly, right? If we says we campaign, create a Celts for Change version 2 or something like that, folk right away will go, that's that we pleb for Acsom, I'm not doing anything to do with him. So that's why all we can do as a platform is these guys who are going to do stuff, we give them that platform and we go, aye, good luck. But I couldn't get involved with it because folk have already got an opinion on me.
Great. It wouldn't be an Acsom-driven movement, Kev, because, and I'll tell you why, if someone says, do something, I think you should do something, and then we say, all right, we will, this is what I think we should do, you're going to have enough people saying, no, it's no, because that's what we've seen in the comment section today. Don't trust that we emojis with snakes and all that. So this is where we are. A positive change, I think, is better than no change whatsoever. So I'm going to go to the AGM on Tuesday, and then we'll update you on here as to how that goes as well. I'm sure it'll be an interesting one. Connor McLeod, you're on the YouTube. Let us know what you think. Kate, listen, there is no echo chamber in here. Me and JP are disagreeing with Kev. We're doing it without falling out. Kev is putting all the onus on Brendan Rodgers for the defeat the other night. I think it's more systemic. JP thinks the same. Let us know in the comments section who you agree with. Connor McLeod, Celtic and Rangers have never played each other in Europe before. Could this be the year? God, I'm not even looking that far ahead. That means we would both need to progress through the Europa system for us to meet each other.
I think that's unlikely.
Well, at the moment, JP, I think you're right. We've also got Falls Road coming in. You're on the YouTube. In my honest opinion, Dermot Desmond believes Rodgers bottled his recruitment allowance, and now the wee boy is being punished. I think the wee boy might be Brendan, and us along with him. Desmond meddles behind the scenes. It's crystal clear. JP, how worrying is it when you ask your manager after getting bounced at the Champions League, right? Because at some point the conversation must have happened between the manager of the football department and the people that actually deal with the finances and the budgets. The conversation must have happened. What's my budget if we get in? What's my budget if we don't? And he's asked the question, straightforward question, and he says, I don't know. How worrying is that?
I think he said, I don't know, as a reactionary, I'm not saying either way, because he obviously does know. There's no way, and like you said, there's no way in the world that conversation hasn't been had. But he's obviously like, what can I put out in the public domain? I can't sit here and go, well, I actually. Because there's probably been a lot of I actuallys that he would love to have done. Like, I mean, there was a few people saying the other night, wouldn't it have been great if Brendan Rodgers had come out Mourinho style post-match and just absolutely lit a flamethrower under Desmond, Nicholson, Mackay, whoever, but he didn't. He just dealt with the post-match as he dealt with the pre-match and all the pressers that have happened in the last few weeks. The concern for me is that there was chat about him speaking to Dermot Desmond at Tannadice about a new contract for Maeda, and as someone whoever brought that up said, why is Dermot Desmond speaking to Brendan Rodgers about a new contract for Dyson Maeda? Why is that conversation happening between them? Why is it
a shareholder? Why is a shareholder getting spoken to about in relation to a player's future? Because this is what we need to get away from, JP. He's not the owner of Celtic Football Club. He's not even the majority shareholder. He's the largest shareholder, not the majority shareholder. You need to have more than 50% shares to be the majority shareholder. But he acts as though he is the controlling force, and everybody allows him to do it, JP. Why? You're right. Why is Brendan Rodgers talking to Dermot Desmond about Dysfunction Maida? That is just bonkers. That shows you the dysfunctional nature of this football club.
Well, it is bonkers. Sorry, JP. It is bonkers, but I read the other night there on The Athletic, that hipster thing that I like reading to keep me doing with the kids. And what they were talking about, the Eze deal by Crystal Palace to Arsenal when it looked like he was going to Tottenham. Now, Tottenham had been talking to Crystal Palace for 2 weeks, and the boy who does the deals with Crystal Palace didn't like the way Tottenham were doing it, right? So Eze phoned Mikel Arteta and says, is there any chance you could, is this move still going to happen, right? And Arteta went, luckily enough, there's a board meeting this afternoon and I'll see what can be done. So he's been into that board meeting, says to the board, and because the Arsenal owner was in the country for that board meeting, they got it done there and then. If the Arsenal owner had been in America, where he's actually based, they wouldn't have got that done there and then. So this asking an owner seems to be not as uncommon as we think. Like no asking the guy who's not the owner.
No, I know.
Which is so. Yeah. Even though Arsenal got a sporting department, they still had to go to the owners and go, "Can you green light this for us to actually go through?"
By the way, it's a huge investment. Let's see if you're going to break your transfer record, right? I get the fact that you're going to have to get somebody to sign that off. But going back to what you said, they asked the owner, Kev. Dermot Desmond's not the owner.
But what I'm saying is that's maybe not as unusual as what we like to think.
I just want to say, because there'll probably be people in the comments saying, oh, you've had all the success under Dermot Desmond, you should be grateful for what he's done for the club and the financial stability that his wealth has provided, if that is indeed the case, if that is true. And I am not ungrateful to Dermot Desmond or anybody that's been responsible for bringing success to Celtic in my lifetime, and certainly over the last 25 years since Martin O'Neill rocked up. But that doesn't mean to say that we just go, oh, well, because of everything you've done in the past, that gives you a pass for the other night. Absolutely. No way. No way. I know people don't like talking about music or us talking about music, but I'll give you an example. And James and Andy would be quite happy with me discussing this on the show, because I've discussed it on a podcast with James a few years ago. The Twilight Sad were a band that were kind of almost on the edge of jacking it in 2013. Their management wasn't interested really anymore. He wasn't really interested in music, and he was kind of slowly but surely letting go of the reins, and they needed somebody to come in and help them. And James said to me at the time, you're a friend, you're a fan, you're at all the gigs, do you want to help us out with basically management? I hadn't really done that before. I'd done it once with a band when I was 25, but of no real serious level. It certainly wasn't a band that were at the level that the Twilight Sad were at. And I came in and I brought my friend in, Ray, to help out, because I knew that he actually got in touch with me and said, I heard you're getting involved. I'd like to get involved as well. And I was like, absolutely brilliant. You're the right guy. And for the next basically 10 years, Ray and I looked after the band together and made the decisions that led them to get back to a better place, whereby they weren't going to quit, and it also got them back to a point where they were at the stature that they should have been in Glasgow, selling out 2 nights at the Barrowlands. You were at one and you were at both of them.
Phenomenal.
So that was a million miles away from them. In 2012, they did the Barrowland and didn't sell it out, and James was absolutely devastated about it, because kind of thought that was our only chance. Once you got to the Barrowland, you don't sell it out, it's gone. But we got them back to that. You're not trying to tell me that there isn't somebody out there that, I mean, John Hughes has described, Yogi's described Michael Nicholson as the paperwork guy. So if a paperwork guy is not going to answer back to the head honcho, so I still don't know. Well, maybe one day we'll find out what happened with Dominic Mackay, but I'd be very interested to know what the real reason Dominic Mackay was walked out the door 3 months after arriving. But you're not trying to tell me that there isn't somewhere in world football that can come in and do a job at Celtic, strategic decision making, because it's decision making that ultimately leads you to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Poor decision making, results like last night, the other night happens. But somebody can come in and turn that around. There's no way you're telling me that there's not somebody out there that can do that, rather than just have this kind of in-house mentality of like, oh well, we know him, he's trustworthy, he's been around, and you know, blah blah blah. He'll not do this, or he'll not do that, or he'll not say this to the press or say that. It's got to be for what's best for Celtic. I mean, it feels like, and I said this a few weeks ago, it feels like I'm repeating myself, but now we're in the place where we're out of the Champions League. There's so much good about what they've done, but they've taken us so far, and it feels like it's time to let go of the reins even a little bit, and let somebody come in and go, right, you've got this, you've got this, you've got this. This is all great. This is all great. We can work with this. We can get you to this point. And the frustrating thing for me is that to have got out of that the brand new Champions League group phase stage, we play in it for the first season and we get out of that group. And that to me was huge. It didn't matter about who we played next. It was like, wow, we've actually, because at the start of that, people were looking at it going, nah, there's no way you're not getting out of that. Like Rangers fans laughing and going, oh, you'll be bottom of the group and all this sort of stuff. And then we get out of the group and then we do what we did against Bayern Munich. That was with Brendan Rodgers as manager. It wasn't somebody else. And we've let that team and squad dilute in quality to the point that we get knocked out of a team ranked 311th in Europe.
That was 6 months ago. It was only 6 months ago.
In the calendar year. And
we got a glimpse of what was possible.
The excitement levels you get as a fan, to aspire to go back to that, and the excitement of the home and aways and going to these amazing stadiums and everything else. And you know, I was earmarking like maybe one European trip this season and thinking, right, where will it be? Where will I go? And then you look at the teams, the options for the Europa League, and it's just like, it just feels so deflating. And then you look to see who's responsible. And I don't know if you saw this comment yesterday, but I'm going to read it out because it's had 103 likes, and very rarely do YouTube comments get that level of likes. It's usually either liking something negatively. But a guy said, Rangers fan here, Gary Buchanan, taking my blue tinted specs off, I can't believe you're bored. I know Rangers have been a shambles for the best part of 15 years, but if the shoe was on the other foot, I would be wanting our board to hammer home the dominance and invest in the squad to guarantee Champions League football. It's almost as if your board doesn't want to get too far ahead of us. It seems they are robbing the fans. Absolutely disgraceful. I mean, what is the board actually sitting on 70 or 80 million for? Mind-boggling. Edit to add, I enjoy the show. Normal, honest football fans. Edit to add again, thanks for the likes and respectful replies. It's good to see we can put our differences aside to respect our passions for both our great clubs that both deserve better. Keep it respectful and keep it to football. Now, that is somebody that's actually taking the time to write that and say what they see about what's going on with us.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, if it's obvious to other football fans that would normally absolutely hate us and sing about being up to their knees in our blood, then how is it not obvious to the board where they've gone wrong?
Because, you know this, JP, it's culture. We've used that word so often. What does it actually mean? That's the reason Don Mackay didn't last, because he couldn't fit in with the culture at the football club where it's everybody bows down to this individual, right, who's the richest man in the room. Have you ever been in a room full of rich people? The ego, the narcissism that Kev talks about, it's unbelievable. It's palpable, right? It's actually not a nice vibe. To be honest with you, it's like who's got the biggest checkbook, and everybody's out doing everybody else. So the richest guy in the room's making all the decisions at Celtic. When was the last time he pulled a rabbit out of the hat, Kev? When was the last time Dermot Desmond pulled a rabbit out of the hat for Celtic? Because it wasn't Brendan Rodgers coming back, because he'd already been here. I mean, that wasn't as if that wasn't shocking at the time.
Rodgers the first time, and Martin
Rodgers
O'Neill.
first time, 2016,
and Martin O'Neill.
10 years ago almost. Right.
When basically O'Neill, when he basically just walked in with him and told the board, this is the Celtic manager.
What's he done in the last 10 years? What investments he made in Celtic in the last 10 years? Out his own pocket? Zero. None.
Zero. The investment comes with the fans and prize money, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
But JP, you do say something, and I always go back to this. I've been in a room where boys who are still involved in Celtic told us that competition in Scotland and the old firm is good for Celtic. I've been in a room, and they boys are still there. They guys are still making decisions there. And we can go back, and they're still doing the same things, waiting to the last week of transfer windows, gambling with getting into the Champions League. I still think they've got PTSD after Rangers went bust, and we had to shut the top tier. I really do think that they do not want to get too far in front of them because it's bad for business.
There's two occasions, Kev. There's two occasions that you could have the PTSD theory on. Rangers going bust in 2012, and I'm not doing that as a dig because JP, that message you wrote out was tremendous. It's not a dig, it's just what happened in 2012. And what happened in 1994, where we were staring down the barrel of similar, right? We were looking at receivership, and we've spoken about that. And those two periods, in many, many ways, I feel hold Celtic back, Kev, because it's almost as if, but look what happened back then. Back in the old days with the old board, right, they couldn't take us into modern football. There had to be all-seater stadium. There was a deadline because of the Taylor report, and we didn't have the know-how or the business acumen on the board to take us into modern football. This time round, I'm looking at the board that we've got just now, and I'm thinking, right, we need the club to move away from that parochial nature of always having to have that rivalry, Kev, and let's actually compete in Europe. Something we've not done since the 60s and 70s on a regular basis. Let's actually compete in Europe. I don't think the board, going back to what JP said earlier, are the board to take us there. JP, I just don't think they've taken us this far. They can't take us that next bit. They can't take us there. And that's why I think we need to have that change, because the culture and the mentality of the current board, and it filters throughout the club, Kev, is that as long as we're ahead of Rangers, that's all that matters. That's, you should be thankful for that. JP, what do we do next in relation to a football club? What do we do next? What do you see happening in the next 3 or 4 days? We've got a Rangers game coming up at the weekend. We've got potentially Adamida and Yang leaving the football club. And there's areas of that team already needing strengthened. What happens next for you?
I'm at the stage now where if signings were announced this afternoon, I normally get excited about signings. I can't get excited about any new people coming into the football club or the team. I cannot get excited because you're just completely dumbfounded at the fact that they weren't here a month ago, or in Balak Wish's case, a year ago.
Or in January.
13 months it took us to get that guy.
We knew the same exact fee as we would have paid 12 months ago.
Yeah. We knew the qualifier was coming, JP. Sign them in January for August. Sign them in January for August.
Right, and I know there'll probably be, if anybody from Celtic is watching this, they'll be like, oh, what do they know? They've got no idea. Like, look at you work in a music venue. Look at you host a football show. Kev, you've got no idea, right? Kev just says,
we're not disclosing what you do, Kev.
I know, I didn't want to do that. But they'll be sitting there going, oh, they don't know. But the thing is, the facts are all out there. It's not as if you can hide away from this. Wait, what possible reason or excuse can they have for not having tooled up properly for those games when the manager's saying, I want what's best for Celtic? And to circle back to the Adamida thing, right? Adamida did well enough in that 6-month loan spell that Rodgers had every right to push the boat out to them or to whoever to say, I want Adamida. After he said he wants Adamida, the negotiations for that fee, do you think he's sitting on the phone to Norwich City being like, right, well, we'll give you this and a case of Iron Brew? Do you think that's what he's like? There's no way that he's involved in the actual nitty-gritty of, he's just gone, yes, I want that player. Yes, I want him back on a full-time basis. The player said to me when he was here, he would be up for coming back permanently, because obviously they'll have had that conversation. They don't not speak, right? And then Adamida comes back, and I don't think Adamida had as bad a season last season as has happened. But you don't know what's going on with him personally. You don't know if he's not enjoying being in Glasgow. You don't know if there's personal reasons. But it's also up to the player at that point. You can't blame Brendan Rodgers for Adamida's form right now. That's on the player. As we've said repeatedly, and as I've said repeatedly, the reason that I've backed Adamida and backed him to the tune of £10 last week for a hat-trick, which was obviously complete naivety on my part / blind faith. But the reason I backed him is because I've seen him score goals in person at Villa Park, a Premier League team.
Yeah.
I've seen him score. I've not seen him. Well, I have seen him score against Rangers in the cup final. I wasn't at Ibrox either of the 2 games that he scored in them, but I've seen him score other goals. I've seen him score away goals that got us to the title, and a very, very important title at that. That we had to win that season, because that could have shifted all sorts of things in their favour at that point. I haven't seen that with Yang. I have not seen Yang do anything. And despite the fact that you could say, oh, but everybody was rubbish the other night. Right, but starting left wing in that game for Celtic is such a big piece of the puzzle that, honestly, you can't sort of play down how big a game that was. And we're starting on the wings with a veteran and a guy who is going to potentially end up at Birmingham City, joining Kyogo, and Iwata, guys who've left our club. And I could only think that the strategy for Kyogo is to have to do well for Birmingham and try and get another move, because there's no way he's playing out his career at Birmingham City. What a tragedy that would be if that was to be the case, because he was a brilliant player for us. But I just
put my money on Birmingham City to beat Kairat Almaty.
Well, yeah, but the Adamida thing, it's down to the player. I think he did everything right in terms of the loan spell, and then for whatever reason at this moment in time, whether it's like Kev says, whether it's the weight of the jersey, the psychology of not being able to cope with the fact that it's all on him. Which is essentially the same thing as being the jersey too heavy. Yeah. But as I said last week, he got hooked at half-time in that first game at home, where Rodgers had put his faith in him to start that game, and you're looking for him to do the business against them at home to mean that the other night isn't a banana skin that we eventually slip and bang our head off the curb on. And then he gets taken off at half-time, and you've got the captain shouting at him and everything else. So that is, like you said, that's an attitude thing. That's a player thing. It's not on the manager. So therefore, when you talk about when the comment that came up about he's not getting he's wasted his money that he got last season. He didn't waste it.
I disagree with that. I disagree with it, JP, because what's happening there is people are specifically looking at each individual's performance rather than the collective success of Celtic last season. Had Celtic gone out in this transfer window and spent another £30 million on another 3 players, don't you think we'd have had a better chance of getting through that qualifier? And then you get into the Champions League, and the 6 guys you've brought in over the 2 windows retain or improve in value. And you, as a football club, have got 6 guys there, JP, who are of sufficient quality that the manager has fought to bring to the football club, and you're starting to build a team that's capable of progressing on a regular basis in the Champions League.
But one last thing, had we brought in a replacement for Kyogo in January, or even at the start of this window, then you wouldn't have had all the pressure heaped onto Adamida. You might not have had the version of Adamida that we are currently seeing had we gone out and got another striker. For him to, just because we paid $9 million for him doesn't mean to say that he automatically becomes the main striker. We could have gone out and signed another striker for $10 million. And why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we in 2025 not be spending £10 million on another striker and have 2 of them?
Yeah, right. I'll just say, final point, because I'm going to go and meet the Not The View boys with a big pile of Not The Views from back in the day to talk roughly about what we've just spoken about, actually, is compare and contrast the Adamida as he walked up to take that penalty the other night versus the Adamida who scored the penalties at Easter Road during his loan deal. Two different animals. If his hair's been turned, if it's too much for him, as it might well be, JP, then you know what? Sell him. But bring somebody else in, and bring somebody else in that the manager wants to work with. All I'm thinking about at the moment is Terminado, followed by AEK Athens, followed by short-termism in the January, just to get us over the line. I wouldn't be surprised if we brought in some short-term players between now and Monday at 5 o'clock. Thanks, everyone, for getting involved. Kev, JP and I can disagree without falling out. Do the same in the comment section. Let us know what you think, and join us again tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of